and those persons that reside in the community of Coconut Grove, Big Pond, Black Village, Rock Crusher, and Oakfield, Mr. Deputy. I continue to be grateful to them for this opportunity to now be serving in my second time in this honorable place, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, this debate today, as is every debate, is a very important debate to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the future of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and what type of country do we want to see and continue to build for future generations of Bahamians, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, this larger issue of crime, Mr. Deputy, we have been grappling with in many variations, Mr. Deputy, over the many decades, and governments have done their endeavor best, some of the Bahamian people would say, to bring some necessary changes and reforms and relief as it relates to the crime issue in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Deputy, this amendment to the Bail Act, Mr. Deputy, this government bringing this bill to this Parliament to be amended, it is quite interesting, Mr. Deputy. The member for Yamacraw used the phrase that's going around a lot now, not to politicize, depoliticize crime, not to politicize crime, Mr. Deputy. And we agree. The opposition has been consistent in saying that crime is not a political issue and that we ought not make it a political issue. Meaning that no one has said that the government is responsible for someone being murdered. No one on this side has said that the government knows where people are going to get murdered and they don't stop it. That would be politicizing crime. But what is not politicizing crime, Mr. Deputy, is for the opposition and every right-thinking Bahamian who cares about this country to have expectations and offer constructive criticism to the government for where they've been lacking, Mr. Deputy. After all, what are governments elected for if not to provide significant progress and relief to the Bahamian people in a way that they can feel, that they can acknowledge, and that they can see that is manifested in their daily lives. And I heard the member for Yamacraw, talk about the two sides of our mouths. Mr. Deputy, it's amazing, Mr. Deputy, it's amazing. When there's I know for me as a member of Parliament, when there's a particular debate on the horizon, and as these bills are tabled, as I'm sure many of us will do, you get into your research to understand some of the complexities of some of the more complex issues and complex bills, if you will, particularly if that issue isn't necessarily within your wheelhouse, so to speak, and that you have to read up on some things to understand exactly what is being achieved, and to talk to persons, in the profession and in otherwise that's related to a particular bill, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I just find it remarkable. I find it remarkable, Mr. Deputy, that 2 years in, Mr. Deputy, that 2 years into this administration, 2 years in, after having had a record month in March of 2022, which was 22 murders. That was in March of 2022. And in that same year, 128 murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that now the government is saying now they have been, I heard earlier today, I think it was the member for Carmichael, that this government should be applauded for moving swiftly. 2 years in, that this government is moving swiftly, Mr. Deputy. After 22 murders in March of 2022 and 128 murders, the second largest amount of murders in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
In the history.
Right?
In the history.
Right? So, Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, and this is the point that I wish to emphasize. Being desirous of not having this issue politicized does not mean you are free of criticism for what you didn't do and what you have not done. Because we have consistently said that the government, must lead, Mr. Deputy. That's what we've said. So, Mr. Deputy, what the government is proposing today, in the first month of 2024, where was this 2 years ago? Where was the sense of urgency? Why now? Where was the sense of urgency, Mr. Deputy? Mr. Deputy, you know, history can be very instructive, Mr. Deputy. History can be very instructive, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, in 2011, the F&M government, under the leadership of the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram, brought to this Parliament a suite of legislation to deal with the crime issue in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Deputy. Right. And Mr. Deputy, I'd like to read for you, Mr. Deputy, that in 2011 in this Parliament, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador made a very important point. Mr. Deputy. And how I came upon these things, Mr. Deputy, is because like everybody else, you do research to hear the views of past parliamentarians and particularly those persons who you know would have a very succinct and informative view of the issues in the country, Mr. Deputy. And so it was said in here, and I believe, Mr. Deputy, that you can take out where it says F&M and you can put PLP. It says here that we are here today to discuss not just an important issue, but the most important issue facing the Bahamas. This was 2011. This is now 2024. A government's first responsibility is to protect its citizens. And the honorable member at that time said, after 4 of the most violent years in our nation's history, it is clear to all that this responsibility has not been met. I wish to focus on those words just to say, Mr. Deputy, that we are here today not just to deal with that important issue, but the most important issue facing the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I do believe, as the honorable member said back then, that a government's first responsibility and its priority is to protect and to keep the Bahamian people safe, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, you know, I saw the blueprint for change, right? The blueprint for change. The blueprint for change. The Bahamian people call it the blueprint for pain. Yes. Right? Bahamian. And
those that can't afford treatment.
Mr. Deputy. Tackling crime, Mr. Deputy. The PLP will ensure that the necessary reforms are executed for a safe Bahamas. Nobody asked the government to put this in their political platform. This is what they promised the Bahamian people. So the point is that you don't get to say, now that you're not, or that you have not fulfilled that particular promise to the Bahamian people, you don't get to say now that you don't want constructive criticism, Mr. Deputy. It is something that they have promised the Bahamian people, and it is something that they have not delivered on, Mr. Deputy. So we bring it now to this debate, Mr. Deputy. The honorable member, which I thought threw a low blow at this opposition, and the honorable member for East Grand Bahama got up and rightly defended our position. Right? First of all, I haven't heard anybody get up here to advocate, in his words, that that bail offenders, or what was his words? What did he say? There are bail offenders that we are advocating for a certain category of people who are, you know, right. So that's what he's saying. So, Mr. Deputy, in the same breath, he talks about depoliticizing crime, but makes a statement like that. He makes a statement like that, Mr. Deputy. But the Bahamian people see that for what it is, Mr. Deputy.
Moved them out of education.
Mr. Deputy, this particular bill and what we are doing here today, in that same contribution by the honorable member for Cat Island relative to crime during that particular time in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and in response to the Free National Movement and the Prime Minister at that time, the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram, Mr. Deputy, in the speech, and I thought that this too was instructive because I believe that it can be adequately appropriated today for this debate, which is these crime bills, obviously the honorable member was talking about at that time, are the answer to the wrong question. The question, and I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to fix it again. The question the F&M clearly asked themselves was, what do we do about the political problem we have because of our obvious failure to fight crime? That can be asked today. The question the PLP clearly asked themselves was, what do we do about the political problem we have because of our obvious failure to fight crime?
Yes, sir. Pick Juju.
What the F&M should have asked themselves is, what are the most effective measures to prevent, prosecute, and punish crime? So I switched that out. What the PLP, what this government should have asked themselves, what are the most effective measures to prevent, prosecute, and punish crime, Mr. Deputy? Mr. Deputy, the interesting thing about this discussion on bail, if you would look, Mr. Deputy, at the various utterances, Mr. Deputy, the various utterances on the whole idea of bail over the years and the decades, right? Mr. Deputy, Tribune article says, AG says he is not at odds with PM on Bail Act, right? And if you look through it, said that Attorney General Ryan Pinder said his view that the Bail Act does not need to be amended is not at odds with the Davis administration's move to amend the law. Right? Also, he says there's adequate protection and adequate ability for the judiciary to deny bail in certain instances. Right? And I'm going to tell you for a minute why that's very instructive. Right? Mr. Deputy, this is the Tribune article, September 19th, 2014. Monroe, you don't need new bail restrictions. You need faster court cases. Monroe, the member for Freetown, you don't need new bail restrictions. You need faster court cases. Okay? A prominent lawyer said the government should focus on promptly trying accused criminals to keep them off the street, as he explained. Why it was unnecessary for new bail restrictions, Mr. Deputy. What's the point of order, Mr. Deputy?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Yamacraw.
What's the point of order?
Sit down. Yeah. There you go. Mr. Deputy, the member is quoting from numerous articles, clearly identified, but he's not identifying where he's quoting from. He's just using quotes, and he's calling last names. The member must adhere to the rules when it comes to quoting from articles, and is he adopting and laying the quotes that he are making?
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Good thing you know the rules.
Thank you very, 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 very much, Mr. Deputy. All right? Mr. Deputy, I pointed out these quotes for a very important reason, that there has been a number of different perspectives laid out publicly relative to this issue of bail for years and decades now, right? I would have obviously just talked about this article where it says AG says he's not at odds with PM on Bail Act because of some comments that he made about the efficacy of amending the Bail Act. So what it, in my view, in my humble view, Mr. Deputy, and I think in the view of a number of Bahamians, is this. With that issue being bantered around in terms of perspectives and no clear-cut position from members of the government relative to bail and the issues surrounding bail. It is clear, Mr. Deputy, that this issue here, as it relates to the larger issue of dealing with crime in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, right? It is, if I could use a word, clearly it is not as consequential to the issue of crime overall in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, not saying that it may not be necessary. The point that I'm making is, Mr. Deputy, what I wish to, and I'm sure this opposition wishes to, keep in the fore of the government on behalf of the Bahamian people is that we have a major problem, Mr. Deputy, major problem, that we continue not to deal with in a significant way, particularly the issues of prevention, Mr. Deputy, and what it is that will cost us now in the next 20, 30 years to see major, major gains, Mr. Deputy. We are still refusing in many ways to deal with the issue that continues to plague us, continue to plague the Bahamian people, Mr. Deputy. And 2 years later, Mr. Deputy, 2 years later, the audacity of the government, the audacity of the member of Yamacraw to stand up and to make such statements about the opposition and two sides of their mouths, Mr. Deputy. Where are the reforms, Mr. Deputy? The government must accept the responsibility that constructive criticism and debate about what they are doing and not doing is an acceptable part of our democracy and an acceptable part of what we do here. This notion that the government should be free, or when the government gets constructive criticism, ideas, suggestions, or that members of this side, members opposite, will channel and reflect the frustrations and the anger of the Bahamian people, you're politicizing it. Yamacraw, where was your voice when the billboards were put up?
Yes.
Right? You weren't around.
Yes.
Right? So if you want to stand up on principle, stand up now and say that the billboards were a problem.
The chair recognizes
It
the
don't matter.
honorable
He can
member
say
for
right now.
Yamakura.
Mr. Deputy, if the good member was listening, I sent a message because that's so easy to respond to where I was when the billboards went up. And if he is talking about the billboards, I asked him before in this parliament, and I implored all of the younger members of parliament, I did it just now. I said, if we can, as younger members of parliament, as newer members of parliament, not follow a trend of politicizing, that is when I made the comment. So the member don't need to go back to where he was on billboards. I'm asking today, and I've asked already, that we should not politicize crime. We are seeking to prevent repeat offenders from wreaking havoc on our streets. Clearly, they're using the bail loophole to go on the streets and recommit the same crimes over and over and over again. We're taking that from them in efforts to make the country safer. Our view is that persons are abusing the bail system. This bill seeks to prevent that as much as possible. That is my view. And I'm asking the member to just have a level of professional integrity and speak out of one side of his mouth.
Mr. Deputy, first of all, I can use a Bahamian vernacular, and I hope this is unparliamentary. But the member for Yamakor just reached. I've been here longer than you, man. You just reached, right? So the member just reached. The member just reached. Mr. Deputy, the member and members of the government continue to try to avoid this responsibility, Mr. Deputy. And the only point I'm wishing to emphasize, Mr. Deputy, is that as a government, you don't get to choose when you want to take a day off from accepting the responsibility, or the constructive criticism that the members of the opposition or the Bahamian people lay at your feet, Mr. Deputy. I asked the honorable member, who has talked about depoliticizing and talked about on his feet just now, Mr. Deputy, about the younger politicians. And so the member for Yamakor, in being one of those younger politicians, had the opportunity just now and to stand up and say, you know what? What happened with those billboards? It was a disgrace, and that was politicizing. But again, Mr. Deputy, he wouldn't stand up and say that. He wouldn't say that, Mr. Deputy.
Yes.
He wouldn't say that, Mr. Deputy.
Sully our international reputation.
So, Mr. Deputy, and Mr. Deputy, and Mr. Deputy, and Mr. Deputy, as you saw today, Mr. Deputy, with a number of the contributions today, particularly, actually, whether in this House as we debated, because there are a number of attorneys in here, a number of them have spoken either through their contribution or, as in the case, the member for Fort Charlotte, who would have got up on his feet to make some interventions, right? Even in their professional capacities, right, there's a legitimate discussion and debate going on in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So why, if that discussion is going on out there, right, by senior persons in the legal profession and everybody in the legal profession, that discussion is going out there. To say that that discussion going on in here is offensive, basically, and say that it's an issue, I think it doesn't do proper service to what we do in here or to the Bahamian people, Mr. Deputy. Because the Bahamian people are much smarter than a lot of us give them credit for. Because the reality of it is the questions that have been asked by this opposition so far are legitimate questions relative to this bill, the implications of the bill on many aspects of jurisprudence in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and it's a legitimate debate. It's a legitimate debate. So, Mr. Deputy, for the honorable member or any other member in the government to say that anything that's short of us just standing up and saying, oh, we support the bill,
Yeah, please,
anything short of that, that's not what we were sent here for.
please.
We weren't sent here to be a rubber stamp. It doesn't work that way, right? And it doesn't diminish anybody on this side who has a legitimate question, Mr. Deputy. And Mr. Deputy, you know, and Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, the thing is this, in life you have to understand your limitations. And what I mean by that is this, right? One of the particular things during this debate today, right? While I did a year and a half of law school, I am not a lawyer. So there were certain things I wanted to hear from these members who's in that profession on both sides.
15.
Right? How much? How many? 15.
At least 15.
I wanted to hear from the member for Fort. I wanted to hear from the member for Fort Charlotte, who's a senior attorney in this country, and that debate, that's a benefit to us. So don't come in here, Mr. Deputy, if you will. Don't come in here and try to diminish, Mr. Deputy.
Go pay that medical bill.
Mr. Deputy, right? So don't come in here
Members, order.
try to diminish the words of the opposition.
Exactly, yes, sir.
Don't lock women up.
Because we are doing our parliamentary duty and our duty to the Bahamian people to ask questions about the efficacy, the effectiveness of a piece of legislation that has far-reaching effects. And if you simply put this in the realm of, this is just about the would-be offenders who are on bail who offended, and just put it in that category alone, then clearly you ain't read the bill.
No.
Because it ain't that simple. That's one aspect of it. And the reality of it is, with any piece of legislation or any law that's enacted, one of the fundamental questions that you always have to ask is, all right, that in your attempt to fix this, are you creating any deeper problems? And you find ways to make it better. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's what we do, Mr. Deputy. There have been lots of times when pieces of legislation have come here, and the governments that are smart say, you know what? Those amendments that were made by the opposition would make this bill better. And obviously, over the decades, amendments happen. I mean, we're doing it now. Amendments happen to bills.
Yes.
So the point is do not try to belittle or diminish the view of the opposition that's reflecting the concerns of the Bahamian people. Yes, they want to answer the crime, but this ain't about this the shiny object in the room, and that's the shiny object, and no matter what is said, push it down their throat. Right. This is a very important intellectual debate on a piece of legislation that's going to impact our country, just like other pieces, Mr. Deputy. But what it seems that some government members want, including the member for Yamacraw, is, you know what? We getting a lot of this pressure on crime. We don't want you all to add constructive criticism. We don't want you all to add constructive criticism. We just want you all to say, hey, we ain't all the way. But it's amazing, Mr. Deputy. No, the honorable member talks about. No. So, Mr. Deputy, it's amazing that some members of the government, including the member for Yamacraw who got up, right? They want the kumbaya moment, if you will. They want the kumbaya moment, Mr. Deputy, but they don't want the criticism, the justifiable criticism that comes along with it. We have said, Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Yamacraw.
I'm not yielding, Mr. Deputy. I'm not yielding, Mr. Deputy.
The member has repeatedly, over and repeatedly, identified in his speech since I made a point, a very clear point earlier, it seemed to have struck a tone with the member. And he continually attribute...
Honourable member.
He attributes something that is false.
One second, members. Yeah. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you. The member is he is falsely attributing words to in respect to what I've said. I made it very clear to the member that we have an opportunity to change how we debate in this House, how we express our displeasure with certain things, and particularly I made the suggestion that we move in a different way when it comes to crime, that we do not politicize crime. He is saying I'm asking for a Kumbaya moment. I'd ask for no such thing. That's his words. I'm asking that the member, if he want to refer to me, he be accurate, and I used earlier, have some intellectual integrity and professional integrity, because we're both in this house sitting, you know what I said, I know what you said, and I'm bringing a point of order based on what he is attributing to me that is totally untrue. And withdraw it or just go in a different direction.
The only point I'm making, and every time, respectfully, the member for Yamacross,
You called him a name again.
he continues to take a hold. Because on one hand, he wants to talk about depoliticizing, right? But before you make that statement, one of the things you have to do is to come with clean hands. So in other words, you know what you say, in my view? You know what you say, in my view, Mr. Deputy? You stand up and you say, you know what? That we have all politicized it. When we did the billboards on crime, we politicized it. But now it's going back in time. The point I'm making, Mr. Deputy.
Order, members.
Right? The point, Mr. Deputy, the point is, Mr. Deputy, right? The honorable member continues to stand, but does not want to acknowledge many of the points that I've made, Mr. Deputy. So, Mr. Deputy, and we have not said, I've not heard any member categorize, articulate what the opposition is going to do or has done. Has anybody done that? Relative to this bill?
No, we know he's misguided.
Nobody has done that. That's my point, Mr. Deputy. Constructive criticism for them, it's like all or nothing. You can't try to make the bill better. You can't give constructive criticism. There's only one way that they desire for this to go, Mr. Deputy. But it does not work that way, Mr. Deputy. This is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This ain't North Korea. All right? This is about the debate and discussions, Mr. Deputy. So, Mr. Deputy, I believe, Mr. Deputy, that we continue to miss an opportunity, Mr. Deputy, continue to miss this opportunity. And let me say for the record, while I see the member for Exuma and Ragged Island is here, we are first Bahamians. But for my contribution, I am first a Bahamian. And while we have our challenges and we are dealing with those challenges and how we fix those, and we are in here, I do believe, Mr. Deputy, that we should fight and we should reject any agenda by any international outlet and otherwise to paint this country in a light that's not true and that's not accurate. And I fundamentally believe that, Mr. Deputy. And I feel comfortable in saying that all of the members feel the same way, Mr. Deputy.
Yes, sir.
All of the members feel the same way. So then, too, just to emphasize, too, just to emphasize, too, so anyone who suggests otherwise will be met with strong conviction and vehemently opposing those type of views wherever they come from, Mr. Deputy. So, Mr. Deputy, as I wrap up, Mr. Deputy, I believe, Mr. Deputy, this is a clarifying moment for us as a people. And the broader I've continued to make on this issue of crime, how do we stop a child who is in school today, who unfortunately is being exposed to certain things that unfortunately will allow them to embrace a criminal life? How do we stop that child today from becoming, unfortunately, and God forbid, a victim of crime or the suspect of crime 20 years from now? I believe that right there, Mr. Deputy, is the ultimate goal. Because as I said last week, because there will not be a prison big enough to hold the amount of criminals that we will have in this country 30 years from now, 40 years from now, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, thank you very much.